Hello to everyone. I'm Evie Evans with Chatham Community Library, and welcome to the first of Chatham Community Library's series of quarterly discussions highlighting women change makers in Chatham County. The series will address areas of interest to all county residents viewed from the perspective of women engaged in both traditional and non-traditional careers, including agriculture, entrepreneurship, education, the arts, law enforcement, and social activism. Today's event celebrates women farmers in Chatham County. Our moderator for today is Debbie Roos, North Carolina Cooperative Extension Agent for Agriculture, Sustainable Organic Production from the Chatham County Center. And Debbie is going to introduce our panelists and lead the discussion. So let me be quiet, put myself on mute, and let her take over. Hiya, Debbie.
Thank you, Evie. It's really great to see everybody. And I was just so tickled that the library came up with this idea for a program because we've got some really amazing women farmers in Chatham County. It's a big joy of what I do, being able to work with them. I'm excited for y'all to get to know them a little bit if you don't already. So we have a panel of 5 amazing women farmers. Unfortunately, Tanita Salanto from Green Panda Farms is not able to join us today, so we will definitely miss her in this conversation, and maybe we'll do something at another time. But what we're going to do is I'm going to start out with all of our farmers and give them a few minutes to tell you about their operation, you know, what exactly they do, because we made sure to include farmers from different sectors of ag, you know, including livestock and produce and also value added production. So they'll tell us, you know, a little background, what they do, how long they've been doing it, you know, where is their farm or business, you know, do they sell directly to the public? And then once everyone's given their brief overview of their operation, I'll start asking them a series of questions, and we'll give all the women an opportunity to answer those questions, and then we'll make sure and save time for y'all's questions at the end. So I hope that sounds good. So I want to start out with Emily Boynton of Fiddlehead Farm. So Emily, if you'll tell us about your operation, what you produce, where is your farm, and those kinds of things. Thank you.
Sure. My name's Emily Boynton, and we have a small farm called Fiddlehead Farm in Pittsboro. We're just about 4 miles west of the Circle. We are now more focused on value add, but we did start out as an actual farm, just growing produce and baking bread and selling at the farmers market in Pittsboro, the Chatham Mills Market. Nowadays, we only grow peppers, the really hot peppers that we use in our hot sauces and our pepper jellies, because those are difficult to source and can be really expensive. We sell both wholesale and at market. We sell at the Pittsboro Market and the Carborough Farmers Market, and then we sell to Weaver Street and then some other smaller, stores in the area. But yeah, we've been doing this for 10 years now. This is our 10th year. We actually started the farm in 2008, but didn't actually start selling at market until 2011. Did I miss anything, Debbie?
I forgot that I'm muted. No, that's great. I so much more to say, but hopefully a lot of that'll come out. Emily's Fiddlehead Farms won some national awards for their food products, so they're pretty hot stuff. We love having them here. Next, we'll go to Tiffany Cooper of Hoppy Farms outside of Pittsboro.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany, and I have my farm between Pittsboro and Goldston on the Pittsboro-Goldston Road, and I am a hops farmer, which is utilized in the process of making beer for the bittering effect beer. I started my farm in 2015 with a little small experimental trial, and I did that based upon some research that NC State was doing around different types of crops that are not necessarily grown in this area, but they were trialing to see if they could be a viable and sustainable crop for us to grow here. And they had some success with hops. And I felt like, well, if I'm going to try something in farming, I think I should probably go for something that there's some good research around and looks like that there is a potential for a market here, since there are so many great microbreweries and there are continuously new ones coming into the area. So I decided to dive right in to hops, and luckily had Debbie help me navigate those very early stages of figuring out how to even get started with a crop that is not common in this area and how to make that work. I have had a lot of success just learning over the last few years about the crops and farming in general. That's not my background. I have a healthcare background, corporate healthcare. So this is completely removed from anything I had experience with. So I've been doing a lot of learning. But luckily, NC State has continued with their program around hops and developing and learning more about the crop and how to make it work in this area. And they actually now have researchers that are experimenting on breeding varieties that do better in our climate with our sunlight and daylight. And I sell directly to the brewers. So my connections are made through a lot of referrals. I have a lot of people that I know who will say, hey, I know such and such in this industry. And luckily I'll reach out, and the community has been very receptive to supporting local hops farmers and are actually quite excited because it's hard to get fresh hops on this side of the country. Predominantly hops are grown in the Pacific Northwest, and to get fresh hops from the Pacific Northwest, usually the air shipping charges are quite astronomical. So most of them never get to work with it. So they're excited to find someone who can grow local hops. And it's been a really great learning experience. I'm enjoying it.
Thank you, Tiffany. Next, we'll go to Karen Jordan of Brush Creek Swiss Farms in Siler City.
Thank you, Debbie, and thanks to the library for the vision of doing this. This is really interesting. So I have two careers. I'm a large animal veterinarian focusing on dairy cattle practice. Of course, if you've watched our industry, a lot of my clients have sold out. My husband and I have a dairy farm. So I guess technically, to answer the question, how to get into farming, I married into it. So we've been married 35 years. And so as I look at these young faces across the panel here, I'm like, oh man, we're an old farm and I'm an old person, but that's okay too. So I can answer questions from how I do in the large animal veterinary practice. When I entered that field, it was very much male dominated. So I can have some good stories about going on calls and they were expecting a man and here comes a woman. And then just the farming in general, the dairy industry to me has been very receptive to the female farmers. But our farm is located, we're on the far western end of Chatham County, outside of Siler City. And we're a century farm family. And if you follow that, that's over 100 years. And I think actually part of the land is approaching 200 years in the same family. Tradition is kind of big for us. And so, but we always are striving to adapt new technology. As far as products, we ship about 600 gallons of milk a day. And our milk, we're a member of Dairy Farmers of America, which is the largest cooperative in the United States. And most of our milk is going to be coming to you in gallon jugs, and mostly the store brands.
Thank you, Karen. All right, next we'll hear from Patricia Parker in Goodhart Farm outside of Pittsburgh.
So I'm Patricia. We have been farming since 2009. We started out in Clayton, renting property, and then we bought property here in 2015. We're the new lucky stewards of Bill Dow and Daryl's farm. It was once called Ayrshire Farm. We have about 20 acres, most of it's in woods. We do 3 acres in orchard, which is a ton of different apples, pears, blueberries. And we also grow about 2 acres of garden, over 100 different varieties of produce. So we grow produce. We do most of our marketing through our 80-member CSA. We do CSA spring, fall, and winter. We skip the summer. And then we also attend 2 farmers markets, the Pittsboro Farmers Market and the Farrington Farmers Market. And we also do some wholesale to local restaurants and Chatham Marketplace. We're located off of Highway 64 between Pittsboro and Siler City.
Patricia, can you briefly explain what CSA is for people that may not be familiar with that term?
Sure. So CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. This sort of exists on a spectrum where really true CSA was started in the United States by 2 women in Massachusetts, and it's where the true form of CSA, the whole community helps grow the produce and they split it evenly. The other end is sometimes where people pre-box items, they're distributors, and you get a box of food every week. So we're sort of in the middle there, where people can come and volunteer at the farm, they can trade for produce, or they can just pay their money and they get fresh produce weekly. Because they invest in us early, our CSA members, they often get to share in the bounty. For instance, we grow strawberries, but we very rarely have any for market. We grow them specifically for our CSA members. So the people who invest in us early, they sort of act like the bank for us. Most of our members pay us in January for the whole year. And so we kind of try to pay them back in really delicious produce and extras instead of interest and money. And it really is this community supported agriculture. There's if you're familiar with Wendell Berry, he has this one line sentence that eating is an agricultural act, and it truly is. And our sort of our CSA is very much community oriented. We've had members now since 2009, many of them.
Great, thank you, Patricia. And finally, last but not least, Mackenzie Whittington of Lillyden Farm in Goldston.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Mackenzie, and I'm from Lillyden Farm, and we, my husband and I, and my children raise a variety of animals for meat that we sell at markets through CSA and a little bit of wholesale. We also milk a small herd of Guernseys that we sell raw milk in a variety of forms, which is our largest market, and we raise chickens for eggs. I got into farming because I married into it. I am from New York City, so farming was not something I thought I'd ever fall into. When Tucker and I met, I was teaching. I was a teacher for 10 years, and I quickly learned that I wanted to become more of a more part of the farm, and so we made that happen. I have in the last 5 or 6 years included a larger agritourism aspect to our farm, where we host summer camps, homeschool days, and adult educational days. It gives me an opportunity to bring in my teaching degree and still be part of the farm. I do a lot of the chores, but I have to give all of the farming credit to my husband because he's the knowledge behind it. And I honestly don't think I could do it without him, but we do make a perfect team.
Thanks, Mackenzie. All right, great. That was fascinating. I love the it's got a great balance of different types of farms here. So I'm going to start off with our questions. The first question, some of y'all did address, but let's just briefly, if you felt like you addressed it in your intro, just kind of mention it again, and we'll move on. But not everybody talked about this. So the question is, what made you want to get into farming? So Emily, we're going to start with you again, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry. I grew up in Texas. I have a lot of family who were farmers, some in Texas, some in Iowa. As I was growing up, my dad raised some dairy cows, and so I kind of always had that experience. When I was in high school, we moved to Detroit, Michigan, and that was quite a culture shock. And that's where I spent the next 20 years of my life, and it's where I met my husband. And when we got married, I had a corporate job, had worked for 15, 20 years and kind of a corporate just that kind of culture, and I really didn't like it. But I mean, it's just what I did. And when living in the Metro Detroit area, I mean, it's just a big kind of corporate-y kind of place. And so we decided when we got married that we wanted to move somewhere else. We were tired of the hard winters. We were tired of driving an hour to work every day. We were just had enough. So we put together a spreadsheet and we ended up moving to this area. We lived in Durham initially, and I decided that I wanted to work for a nonprofit, and I ended up at Seeds, which is a small nonprofit in Durham. At the time, it was a community garden, and they're really starting to get into youth programming. And so I had the opportunity to work with their DIG program, and I ran the after school program called Seedlings, which was for the younger kids. And basically this opportunity changed my life. And we decided that when we had our first child, we decided that we wanted to move out from Durham out to Chatham County and to start a farm. And so that's what we did in 2007. We bought a small, it's almost 6-acre farm just west of town, and we started the process. We signed up to sell at the Pittsburgh Farmers Market and starting in 2008, and I got pregnant with my son Willie. He was a surprise, a very welcome surprise, because I didn't have my kids till I was 40. So I thought, I'll never have any other kids. So we were really excited about that. So that kind of slowed us down. But in 2011, we started at market, and that's kind of where we ended up. And that's kind of the backstory.
Great. Thank you, Emily. How about you, Tiffany? How did you get into farming?
So similar, if I talk about my background, I actually grew up on the farm where the hops are farmed. My uncle was a very big farmer. He did livestock, he did crops, he did corn, he did wheat, he did a little bit of everything. And so I grew up around farming my whole life. And when I got to college, I wanted nothing more than to get away from rural Chatham County and get away from farming. So I finished college up in Raleigh and moved to Phoenix and lived in a very, very large city for many years and did the corporate rat race. And I mean, it was enjoyable. There were a lot of parts of my job I really enjoyed. There's a lot of good work being done in healthcare. So you have to admire all the hard work that goes in from the people that take on that type of career. And then we moved back to North Carolina in 2011 to raise our kids here in North Carolina. And I decided after 5 more years in corporate, I was thinking I just need more flexibility in my life. And what do I want to do? And how do I redefine this next phase of my life? And of course, as you get older, you get wiser, and coming back to farming just seemed like it made sense. It got me moving outside in the sunlight. Those are very enjoyable things. And it gave me the opportunity to learn something very new and drastic, which I was just at a point in my life where I needed and wanted. And I decided to just take on a big challenge because it was less of a output and a risk than it would have been for some other opportunities, in the sense that the land was still available to me. My family still lives on the land, so I could have open land that I could start to use and experiment and trial things with. So I decided to just go all in and see if I could make this particular crop work in our region. So I've enjoyed the aspects of being able to have flexibility and being outside and learning something that's very creative in a lot of ways that I had not had in the past. So it's very rewarding in that sense.
Thank you, Tiffany. And Karen, how about you?
Yeah, the short answer is I'm married a dairy farmer. The long answer is I grew up in Montgomery County, and dad was a truck driver and mom worked in manufacturing, and I love cats and dogs and wanted to be a veterinarian. Did not really know what cows were until I went to the university, NC State. And in that first year, you know, you get your Animal Science 101 class and you go to the dairy farms. And so I just fell in love with dairy cows. So from there, undergrad, I took more extensive dairy courses. Then when I did get into vet school, when we were given the opportunity to specialize, I started concentrating on dairy classes. Externship was 6 weeks of nothing but dairy in Kentucky. Didn't know Kentucky had dairy, did you? But so, and then met my husband to be at the state fair while he's showing his brown Swiss cows. So I love the dairy industry. I'm so thankful for my husband. But that is the long story of how I have just fallen in love with a good guy and a good industry.
Thank you. And you answered my question because I was wondering if you fell in love first with dairy cows or dairy farmer, but you answered that. So that sounds like it worked out just fine. Patricia, how about you? What made you want to get into farming?
So when I met Ben, my husband, I was teaching sociology at Middle Tennessee State University. And Ben was living in New York City, working for Smithsonian Magazine. I was living outside of Nashville, teaching sociology. And we fell in love through letters. And he had this dream that he wanted to farm. He grew up on a dairy farm. And now he knew he never wanted to do dairy. But he wanted to grow produce. And so he sort of said, you know, wherever you go, I applied to a bunch of schools for a PhD. I had my master's. And he said, I'd like to move with you wherever you go. And I said, okay. And we wound up going here. I went to NC State for my PhD. I really got interested in agriculture because of Ben, but also through sociology. I focused on rural sociology and global social change. And I was particularly interested in global peasant movements. La Via Campesina is an organization that sort of started the food sovereignty movement. That's become a much more common term. I was interested in, basically with the start of agriculture, I was interested in it at a very macro cerebral level. The start of agriculture is when we were able to start specializing as human beings and also develop, you know, the economic systems that we have now. And I continued to be very cerebral about it. And then we moved to the farm in Clayton. And I just had an aha moment. I kept falling in love with it. I was always going to market. Ben at first really wasn't. Now he's always, you know, he's great at the farmer's market, but he had a really tough time at first. He never had a job where he interacted with the public. I was a waitress and a bartender throughout my college years, and, you know, then teaching. So market was really my area, and I sort of taught him. And I just fell in love with it. And I had an aha moment when I turned in an assignment in graduate school to my boss. I was an RA, a research assistant. I was on the job that I wanted to have, on track. And I turned in an assignment half done. And I just really didn't care. And went out to Ben and said, oh, I'm so glad that's over. And then my light bulb went off, and it was, you should not be doing this academic thing anymore. This is where your heart is. And so that's how I got into it. Partially married into it, but kind of fell in love with it. Fell in love with Ben first and fell in love with farming after.
Thank you, Patricia. That's great. All right, Mackenzie, I think you've already told us. Anything you want to add to what made you want to get into farming?
Yeah, it was definitely Tucker that made me want to get into farming. And very opposite from Karen, I fell in love with the farmer before I fell in love with the dairy cow. When I met Tucker, he was a full-time cattle fitter, which I never even knew that was even a career. I thought it was nuts. He was on the road fitting cows for shows and sales and keeping cows clipped out in barns. And I had the opportunity to go on the road with him and a bunch of guys for a couple years before we decided to settle down and have kids. When we moved to North Carolina, Tucker was just going to work with dairy cattle and show cattle because we have a big Guernsey show group. And we learned really quick that there's no money in that. I mean, you can ask Tucker, he might disagree, but I'm telling you, there's no money in showing cows. So I was teaching and we had to figure out a way to bring in an income so he can show his cows and build his show herd. And that's how we wound up getting into pigs and doing more beef herds. We bought a bunch of Galloways. And with the rise of alpha-gal, which is a tick-borne disease, we wound up including chickens. But our goal, or his goal, and my goal was never to actually have the kind of farm we have right now. We just kind of grew into it as we felt, as the community was in need of it, and it worked out perfect.
Great, thank you, Mackenzie. Okay, so now for our next question. And we do have quite a few questions to get through. So let's I don't know, try to be efficient with this, but describe some of the most important skills and aptitudes you feel are needed to be a successful farmer. Emily, would you like to kick us off with that?
Sure. First, I'll just tell you a really quick story. When I worked at Seeds, Bill Dow, whose name has already been mentioned here, was on our board, and some of our board members wanted us to. We had a program called DIG, which was where the kids would raise produce and sell it at the Durham Farmers Market, because that was kind of how the Durham Farmers Market got started up again. Seeds kind of pushed. This was in the early 2000s, and so I met with him. You know, what they wanted was they wanted the program to make more income so that it could support the program. And so I was tasked with kind of working on this, and I met with Bill Dow and I told him, you know, we need to track yield, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do this. And he just like laughed at me. And it was like, you know, farming it's like dependent on weather, it's dependent on, you know, this, it's really hard to do all these things. And you know, he kind of like took me down about 8 or 10 notches, and he's absolutely right. So one of the most important things I think is, you know, you really need to be flexible as a farmer, because it's not a given, and nothing is ever going to go the way you expect it to. Some years are great, some years are terrible. You know, and that impacts our value-added business too. We struggle. The strawberry season might be really short, and we have to make as many jars of strawberry jam as we can, and you know, it might end really quickly because there's a big storm or a heat wave. So flexibility is huge. You know, willingness to, you know, make other plans or be able to shift quickly are important. I have a little list here, I think. Willingness to work hard. It is the hardest job you will ever do. For me, that was the hardest job besides raising children that I have ever done. It's a lot of work, but you know, I love it. And there has to be a willingness to do repetitive activities, because you are going to be doing the same thing over and over again. And you'll get really good at it, but you know, you're going to be doing the same things over and over again. And the last thing I'll say, and I think Patricia kind of touched on this, my background, you know, when I got out of college, the first job I had was at a Barnes & Noble bookstore. It was the very first large-scale Barnes & Noble bookstore they had. And that was kind of my career trajectory. I was a store manager, then I went into business development and at the more corporate level. And that experience has helped me more than I could say. Marketing, accounting, business planning, all of that stuff. Just the retail experience, working with customers is huge. And I don't think people really think about that. But I really think that background has been like so important in our success that we've had. And if I wouldn't have had that, I don't know, where we would be. So that's, a great thing to think about, having that experience is super important.
Excellent. Thanks, Emily. How about you, Tiffany?
So I would say, all right, Debbie, the question again was,
Describe some of the most important skills and aptitudes you feel are needed to be a successful farmer.
right. As I was listening to Emily, my mind was racing about through a million different things that she said that were right in line. And I think for me, the biggest thing is just the willingness to learn and flexibility. I mean, if you're not willing to learn something completely outside of your scope of knowledge and listen to experts in it, then you're just not necessarily going to be successful. It will take you a long time to get the results you're hoping for, and you got to flex. You can do everything exactly right and by the book, and a fungus or the weather can completely change course for you, and you've got to flex with it. So you got to be willing to just go with it and learn from it and keep moving forward. I also agree that having the business background made all the difference. It helps you know when to scale up, if you can scale up, if it makes sense to scale up, or if maybe you need to do a reset and start evaluating other opportunities or other crops that may be a better choice for you. And I think also kind of, for me, willingness to engage experts in the field early in the process, not trying to do all of the work on your own and assuming that you can get it all from reading. I think my biggest aha moment was when I engaged you and I gave you an idea of what my plans were. I thought, okay, I think I'm going to start 3 acres of this. And you kind of stopped me in my tracks and you said, I don't think that's a good idea. There are no other farmers around here doing this crop, and you don't necessarily have the equipment or the understanding to maybe pull together what 3 acres might take. And that was the biggest benefit to me as a new farmer, is having somebody say, really be mindful of how far you want to and how fast you want to move without understanding fully.
Thanks, Tiffany. Yeah, it's true. Sometimes my job is trying to balance not squashing someone's dream with helping them be successful and not get in over their head. Yeah, and that's great. All right, Karen, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I'll be brief. Have a lot of passion about what you're going to do. Love it. It's not it's not a job. It's a career. And always be open to new ideas. And in the world I live in, because I'm dealing with live animals all the time, the words we use is continuous improvement. So I am always looking for ways to do a better job with my animals.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that attitude. I feel the same way in my job. If I can learn something every day or every week, I feel like I'm making good progress. Thank you, Karen. Patricia, what would you like to add?
I think a sense of humor is important because you're doing the same thing over and over again, or really something derails you. You got to have a sense of humor about it. Just like you have to have love for it, or you're not going to do it, or you're not going to do it well. For us also was we needed to be frugal in the beginning. We did not go into any debt at first at all, and then we received 2 no-interest loans from individuals that allowed us to buy a $3,000 tractor. We never, until we bought the farm, we never went into debt for anything. And I think that was really helpful for us because neither one of us, we didn't have a savings. We didn't have anything to sort of rely on. So we made sure we paid for what we had as we went. And that's also why CSA was so important for us. And then I think also, good record keeping and being able to analyze your data, which, we do a lot of record keeping. We don't always come back to it. So it's good to be able to do that. And also to be able to switch between being detail oriented and seeing the big picture. Ben's the detail person. So thankfully we have the 2 of us. He's the detail person and I'm the big picture person, and we can kind of have a conversation about where we're headed next.
Thank you, Patricia. And your audio got a little harder to hear this last round. So I don't know if anything changed on your end, if you can maybe look at that, but I can hear you. It just got a little harder to hear for some reason.
Okay.
Thank you. And Mackenzie, what would you like to add to some of the most important skills and aptitudes you feel you need to be a successful farmer?
I would say drive. You have to be passionate, like everyone said, and endurance, because farming is a 24-hour a day, 365-day-a-year job. And there are easy days and then there are really hard days, and you have to be able to work with both of them. You don't necessarily have to enjoy all of them, but you have to endure it. And I think one of the most important things, and it's so easy to just get stuck in your ways, but the willingness to change and to educate and change your feeding program, change your milking schedule, change housing, bedding, all that is so important to keep production high and, you know, your passion high and all of it.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, this next question looks like a big question, but I'm going to kind of ask y'all to be concise with it, if you don't mind, just so we can make sure and cover the other questions. What does a typical day on the farm look like for you? And Tiffany, Emily, you start us off on these, please.
For us, we do have animals. We don't utilize them. We did sell eggs and stuff in the very beginning, but for us, we still do have animals. And so, there's the care for the chickens. We have donkeys. We have, all these cats that show. There's the care for the animals. We only grow during the pepper season, so our season is not year round. So for us, it kind of ramps up in March and goes through July. As far as acquiring fruit for the value add, that's a year round process. And we have built tons of relationships with farmers so that we can do that. So it's basically, making jam, prepping for market, labeling, doing deliveries, just every day there's something. So our what we do probably looks a little different than, what some of the other farmers are doing, but it's constantly changing. And there are some regular activities that take place just at a maintenance level, but for the most part, it's just a constantly changing activity. Up until recently, I had an off-farm job. David does have an off-farm job, so that and adds some other layers to managing it all, but somehow, we make it work.
Thank you. Okay, Tiffany, how about what does a typical day on your farm look like?
So the typical day on the farm looks like a whole lot of weed management, whole lot of weed management and a whole lot of fungus management, just to ensuring and walking the rows every day to check for any kind of pest or fungus issues that could be coming, since the crops are so susceptible to that, and constant weed control, because these crops are just so sensitive to having any kind of nutrients pulled. It's constantly the how do we keep them under control without using, and losing our mind trying to do it. So I would say that's what typical farm management looks like for me. My growing season is March through September. And so in the off season, it's just management of cutback and ensuring you have gotten the root system, covered to stay healthy during the winter process.
Thanks, Tiffany. How about you, Karen?
Yep, our season is every day. Yep, every day. So the returning milkers on at 6:30, takes about 3 hours, turn them off at 9:30. Same thing in the evenings. We have the technology that we use on our cows. It's almost like a Fitbit. So it's a little orange tag in their ear. And it's telling us if she's ruminating, eating, her activity levels, her temperature. So as soon as we get done milking, we're checking our monitoring systems to see if any individual animals need care. And so then that other window that we have between 9:30 of a morning and 6:30 in the evening, we're doing all the other things that we have to get done. So that's feeding baby calves, crops, that's manure application, that's everything else. And sometimes we eat and sometimes we sleep.
And no vacations for dairy farmers, right? All right, great. Patricia, how about you?
So I don't know that I have a typical day. Ben's the one that's out there day in and day out outside doing the harvest or weeding, cultivating, working with two of our part-time employees. For me, I do marketing, I do our labels, I do all the computer work, payroll. I do get out there and get in the flowers sometimes or make garlic braids. And I've got a whole bunch of other value added things that I'm working on. We also have a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old who we're homeschooling. Most of the homeschooling is falling on me because Ben's outside. Although we're working on getting the kids outside more. So it's really, like Emily was saying, it's kind of all over the place. So sometimes I'm in front of a computer. I'm also as being part of, we're also homesteaders, so I try to preserve at least one thing every day, if possible, if that's jam or drying herbs for teas or, just canning, freezing and cooking generally 2 meals a day, if not 3, although I'm working on getting the kids to do that themselves. So yeah, it just kind of runs the gamut. And I also do the CSA deliveries to Raleigh and Cary.
Busy. Thank you. How about Mackenzie?
Our typical day starts with morning chores, which is feeding and pretty much cleaning. It's more so cleaning and milking the animals. My husband and I do with my son Dennett, and Lily actually does an hour of chores before she goes to school in the morning. And then after that, we have to deal with the milk. So we bottle, we make yogurt, we make cheese. And the afternoons are pretty much deliveries or markets, running to the processor, picking up from the processor. And Tucker's usually fixing something that's broken on the farm, picking up feed. We grow none of our own feed on our farm. And let's face it, if we didn't market and advertise, we would not be able to sell our products. So as much as both Tucker and I dislike being behind the computer, it is such an important part to make us successful. So we do need to spend time every single day marketing and advertising our business.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mackenzie. All right, our next question. What makes you excited to wake up every morning and be a farmer? Emily.
Okay, so think about this one. I think the number one thing is the changing seasons. I love just kind of the process of the changing produce and fruit, and all of our jams are made in season. So it's kind of exciting to go through the process. This time of year, we have almost everything that we're going to have for the whole year. So our table is really full, and it's really fun this time of year to be able to share everything with our customers. I also like the ability to start over again every year. So we make everything and then we start over again in, kind of January. We do make marmalades that are not with local fruit, but, we start with the marmalades and then we roll into the strawberries and the blueberries and the peaches, and just being able to start over each year is fun. I really enjoy that. As far as growing the peppers, I love getting the seed catalogs. I love getting the Baker Creek heirloom seed catalog and looking at all the new crazy peppers and just other stuff. Sometimes we'll grow unusual vegetables or things that we see in there that look like fun, and it's a high point of the year. And then finally, the community is one of the things that keeps me going. I mean, if it weren't for the community, there are a lot of times I probably would have given up. So just having the ability to talk to other farmers, our customers, just our community in general is amazing, and I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Emily. How about you, Tiffany? What makes you excited to wake up and be a farmer?
Well, I really like the experimentation process. I have gotten lucky to be able to partner with NC State this year on a couple of experimental varieties that they're breeding to try and make work in the Southeast region better for farmers here. And I've got 2 of those varieties on the farm, and seeing how they're developing and growing and what the aroma's like. I just finished drying those 2 varieties, and I'm about to get them in the hands of some brewers who are willing to experiment and give us some feedback. So I think working with that experimentation and then working with the brewers, since that community has been so receptive and welcoming, and especially open to taking these and doing some test batches and giving feedback, I'm excited about that.
Great. We're so excited that you're working with looping one of our hops breeders. It's really exciting collaboration. And I realize that this question is tough at this time of year, Karen, everybody, because we're just coming off a very long, hot, dry summer. So asking y'all what makes you excited to wake up and be a farmer is like, really, you're going to ask me that now? But Karen, what would you like to say as an answer to that question?
So I'm excited about the challenge. So my challenge every day, excuse me, is the better that I can do, then and looking after my cows, then the cows reward me with higher milk production. And so what is that, those better things that I can do? So I'm always looking at trying to improve cow comfort, and I'm always looking at try to improve the nutrition that I'm offering to my cows. So that every day, it is a challenge to try to keep improving.
Thank you. And I'm seeing some great questions in the chat, and don't worry, we will save time to get to those. Patricia, what makes you excited to be a farmer and wake up every day?
I love having something new to learn all the time. When I was doing sociology, I loved sociology because groups are 2 people or at the nation state level. And with farming, you can it's the gamut. I think farmers are the smartest people around. Once I quit graduate school and went to my first farming conference, I was blown away what Renaissance people farmers are. And so many are cooperative. The way that graduate school and academia is supposed to be was what I've experienced in farming. And there's always curmudgeons and people who don't want to work together, but the interdependence and the community building and being able to barter and eat really well, all of that, love it all. And being able to provide that for my children.
Well, and I absolutely agree. I'm always continuously impressed with farmers and their experimentation, and they keep me on my toes, and they love to learn, and it's very inspiring to all of us. Mackenzie, how about you?
I would say it's my family. We are literally living our dream right now. We're pretty much minimalists, and watching my children take on all the knowledge and their passion for it is just something I never even thought would be possible. It's also fun. We're always having babies born, whether it's cows or goats, whatever, ducklings. So it never gets old seeing new life. And of course, one of my absolute favorite parts about it is the community. Like Emily said, I mean, if it wasn't for them, I don't even know if I would love farming half as much as I do. I love going to the market. I love the interaction. It's all worth it.
Thank you. Yeah, we're so fortunate here in Chatham to have an amazing community. Okay, the next question. What is your biggest challenge to operating a successful farm? Emily?
For us, weather, last year we had a terrible year for peppers. Some of it was probably our fault, but some of it, I think it was you just never know. This year is epic. I mean, we have more peppers than we know what to do with. And I also experienced that in the fruit that I buy from other, farmers. The strawberry season can be so short, and we've lost a lot of strawberry farmers. We used to buy a lot of organic strawberries from several farms in the area, and I know of one big one that is no longer growing strawberries. So, and I see that probably coming more in the future, and I really worry about what will happen when that happens. So this year and last year, we've had a lot of supply chain issues as in related to the value added business. We were unable to buy jars, and the cost of goods went up considerably. Things like sugar and organic lemon, all the stuff that we use, the prices went up a lot, and that created some struggles. So I don't know. I mean, for us going forward, the jar issue is real. In fact, we purchased jars through Weaver Street because it helps them with shipping. But we've just learned that Ball is no longer going to distribute to smaller vendors like them. And so I don't know what that means for us. It might mean us scaling back our wholesale and just focusing on markets. The pricing to have them delivered, even in pallet quantity, is so expensive that I don't know, what we'll do. So there may be some changes in the future. I don't know. So we just have to kind of look at that and see how it rolls. And but there have definitely been challenges the last few years with the pandemic, for sure.
Thank you, Emily. Tiffany, your biggest challenges?
I would say my biggest challenges are equipment, because there are no large scale hops farmers in the Southeast. It just makes it challenging to navigate the growing, harvesting, drying, and sealing of the hops to get them to the brewers. Most of the hops are grown in the Pacific Northwest, like I said, and I think the majority of them are owned by like 50 families. So most of those operations are so astronomically large that they have fabricators on site that create the specialized equipment that they need. So the type of equipment that we need to really make the work of maintaining hops easy is not sold by big manufacturers like John Deere or Kubota. There's just not that on the market. So you're trying to take farm equipment that's used for other crops and manipulate it in ways that are safe but still effective to try and use it to manage your crop, because hops grow tall up a trellis system about 20 feet high. If you have to spray for fungus, you have to kind of take an air blast sprayer and figure out a way to make it work, because every piece of equipment that you get this unusual, not necessarily made for your crop to pull in the back of a tractor, is still going to have some manipulation to it. And those pieces of equipment are usually immensely costly. And there's only one harvester in the state, so handpicking the crop is very, very time consuming. It's just equipment is the biggest challenge to making this a viable crop, I think, because the equipment costs are so astronomical for small farmers.
All right, thank you, Tiffany. Karen?
Yep. The biggest challenge, and that's what we've seen for many years now, is the pricing for the dairy industry. That's the reason I used to work for 30 dairy farmers, and now I work for 3. And the economy, the dairy economy has been really rough the past few years. And we depend on a big export market, and we can just lose 2 or 3% of our export market, and the domestic price will really tumble. So when you hear talk about the different trades, the tariffs, the negotiations that are going on with other countries, it has a big effect on your domestic price that you receive if you're in the dairy industry.
Absolutely. All right, thank you. Patricia, your biggest challenge?
Time and money. There's not enough hours in the day, and we never seem to have enough money to buy what we need. So we're trying to be innovative. For instance, Ben is working on making a bin washer for our bins that we bring our stuff to market in. For the last 13 years, we've been washing them by hand with a scrubber, and it's really affecting his shoulders. So we've got a pressure washer that's rigged up. It's just basically, how do we adjust to do things so we're not tearing up our bodies? We don't have a tractor with a front loader. That would be nice to have. Although we do have a neighbor down the road that has one for fun, and he loves coming and helping us. So we're really lucky. We have, free labor, and he gets to play on his fancy tractor. But time and money, basically.
All right, thank you. Mackenzie?
I would say our biggest challenge is land. We own minimal land. We rent land all over Chatham County. Renting land is hard because you just don't get big tracts. A lot of them are taken up with beef cattle from people who were born and raised here. We don't bring in enough income to be able to get a mortgage on land. So land is definitely our biggest challenge. We have to figure out how we can grow the business without growing our herds because we're so stuck with the amount of land we have. And even though we're renting pastures, that's not guaranteed to be forever. We can be taking off those pastures at any given moment. So land definitely is our biggest challenge. Our second biggest challenge is processing. There just are not many processors around, period. Getting appointments is hard. I mean, processors now are booked out through 2022. So we're trying to make predictions on how much we need to go in. There again, are we growing or are we not growing? So that's you know, a big challenge of ours. With COVID, it was really bad. It's starting to get a little better because people are canceling, so you get on the cancellation list, which is nice. And then for what we do, we have a lot of money that goes out. Our feed bill is extremely high, our processing bill is really high, and our fuel bill is really high. And if we could just farm and not have to worry about paying those bills, it would be awesome. But, you know, making the sales to make it all possible is always a challenge.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, the next question, are there specific obstacles that you face as a female farmer that your male counterparts don't encounter? And if so, how do you deal with them? Emily?
I think for us is because we were getting started when we were also starting our family, that was a big struggle. It was hard. And, you know, we were learning a lot and having lots of failures and also trying to, you know, raise a couple of little kids. And, you know, I think it limited us to some degree. Over time, we've gonna all learn together, and, you know, I wouldn't want it to be any other way for my kids. It's been a wonderful experience for them. They've learned so much. They've learned about the circle of life. They learned, you know, about nature. They got to go to the market, and you know, they had the greatest time. But I mean, that definitely was a challenge. And you know, you're not making a ton of money, so you can't afford childcare. You just make it work. And so for me, that was probably my biggest challenge as a woman was, you know, doing that at the same time.
Thank you, Emily. How about you, Tiffany?
I would say challenge-wise, just because maybe it's because I had spent so many years in corporate life, interacting with executives that were predominantly male, you just kind of learn to speak a different language almost to convince them that you understand what you're talking about. So when I went to places to buy fertilization and asked them about crop management, and they looked at me like, well, why would you want to start a crop that you don't know anything about? And are you really doing this on your own? I'm like, yes, I'm doing this on my own. And I just was able to explain well enough what I needed in terms. And I found that people, while hesitant at first, would come around and start working with me and being supportive. And until I found the right fit, I kept looking for different suppliers of goods. And then when I found a supplier that was very receptive to working with a female in a crop that was not familiar to this area, I found that person and I'm stuck with that person. So they've gotten my loyalty and all my business from it. So it was tough at first, but you can find people out there that will take their time and put in the time and effort to help you out and make it work for you. From the family standpoint, I would say, I think my husband has a completely different career, not even remotely related to farming. So it's good that my kids do get the chance to see me outside and doing really hard work, because it is really hard work and physically challenging. I even showed up at their school in my tractor and did some grading work at their school. And so, I mean, it's good for them to see that women can be out there in those roles also doing this kind of hard work.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tiffany. How about you, Karen?
Yep. So the dairy industry is pretty much equal opportunity. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. We all have the same challenges. Now, way back 100 years ago, when I first started veterinary practice, I was one of the first female large animal veterinarians, and it did take a little bit of men getting used to, oh, here comes a woman and she's going to pull that calf. And so I just accepted that. I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not, but I accepted it because I knew that until I could prove that I actually can do this job, I didn't blame them in the least to have hesitations about this little tiny woman. I've gained weight since I graduated. So anyways, so that's all.
Well, thanks for being a pioneer, a large animal vet. That's awesome. Patricia, how about you?
For me, I think it has to do with roles and the value of women because I'm not the one out there farming. The way that people consider farming is the one who's actually growing the crops, right? Even though I have been out there, even when I was, we once had a neighbor introduce us, and she said, "This is Farmer Ben, and this is the farmer's wife." And I said, "We're not married, and my name's Patricia." And I feel like that has been something that I struggled with and fought against was this idea of the role of the farmer's wife because it's something that we diminish overall in our culture. We don't value farmers in the large scale culture. Here in Chatham, people love farmers. But I feel like larger scale people are sort of like, why or what, or you must be dumb or something, right? Get out of it. So we diminish them generally, and then the role of the farmer's wife, or what we consider the person who is making sure everything else is happening and making sure the farmer's alive out there that has food to eat and kids to raise.
And all of that. It's just been a struggle with those sort of gender things because that's stuff that I studied in sociology, and then here I am doing very feminine work. I never thought I'd get married or have children, and I've been barefoot pregnant in the kitchen, and I love it, but it's just the struggle of those diminished value. Not so much an obstacle, but just something that I've had to deal with myself.
Thanks, Patricia. How about you, Mackenzie?
I'm kind of on the same page with Patricia. I don't feel like this question really applies to me. I haven't noticed it out in the community, and not taking anything away from Tucker, but when Tucker has to do something, Tucker does something, and the kids, he takes a lot of responsibility with them, however, he never feeds them. And, there's a responsibility of running a family and a house and, the marketing and sales that are so easy for him to overlook, that would never even cross my mind to overlook, that I think is my biggest struggle. But I've always felt very welcome as a woman in farming in our community.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna finish up with one final question. If we can keep this a little bit brief, just so we leave enough time to tackle some of our questions from participants. What advice would you give for women wanting to get into farming? Emily?
I wrote down a couple of things. I think the most important thing you can do is, work on a farm first, or go to CCCC, or go through have some kind of experience before you delve in. The other thing is to find a niche. I think that is key, is to figure out what's missing, or what's something new, or really kind of zero in on something and find a niche. It makes it easier to get into farmers markets. It's just I think a really important piece of the puzzle.
Excellent advice. Thanks, Emily. How about you, Tiffany?
I would agree. Definitely working on a farm would have been beneficial for me. I had never done that before. There would have been aspects of farming that I would have probably picked up on from others that may have made it a much quicker learning process for me, like weed management, how other farms do it well. I could have taken that knowledge and really applied it right away, rather than having to trial and error it. So definitely interning, working on another farm. And I would say whatever county the person lives in, if it's Chatham County, definitely look to the county extension agent like you in every county as a resource, and really rely upon reaching out to them and asking for help and questions when you're stuck, because there's nothing worse than being stuck and becoming frustrated and just feeling like it's not working, when really it could be something that person whose knowledge base could easily pick up on and help you work through in a quicker time frame. So asking for help when you need it.
Thanks, Tiffany. As Tiffany knows, as she's mentioned, hops being such a new crop, we've really enjoyed learning together, haven't we, Tiffany?
Yes, we have. We've learned a lot.
Learned lots about hops. Karen, what advice would you like to share for women?
Yeah. Yep, I just echo doing type of apprenticeship or internship, externship, whatever you want to call it, to really dive into the industry and learn all the parts.
Great, thank you. Patricia?
I mean, sort of the same thing. Make sure you have, Ben and I did work for another farmer before we started farming. And he also worked before that on farms. I think maybe, actually, I just lost my train of thought because my kids are over there distracting me. So I'll pass it to Mackenzie.
Mackenzie? Well, yeah, go ahead, Mackenzie.
I agree. Education, more than just textbook, but definitely hands-on. But even a step beyond that is business courses. Tucker and I, all of our education combined, we have 0 business courses. And man, you know, I'm going back and taking some business courses now, but it just is so important when you're running a farm. A farm is a business. So, and also another big advice I would give is like, take the leap of faith. Sometimes it's so scary to get out of that corporate job because you're so set on that paycheck, but life happens when you step outside your comfort zone.
Absolutely, great advice, you guys. Evie, did you want me to just start going through some of these questions from participants, or did you want to moderate that? How do you want to do that?
Debbie, it's Rita. You can tackle the chat if you'd like.
Okay.
And I'll just keep my eyes open for any new content.
Okay, great. So I think panelists, for the chat questions, I'm not necessarily going to send each question to all of you. How about you signal to me that you would like to, you know, respond to it, and certainly we could have more than one of you respond to the question, but I don't think we'll have time to run through all 5 of you, and it wouldn't necessarily apply to all of you. So Maja has asked, she wants to know more about the food sovereignty movement. Does anybody want to comment on that?
So food sovereignty is basically just having control over your food systems, having access, being able to breed your own seeds, having access to land, clean water, feed your own community. You know, there's a lot, you know, you've probably heard, you know, there's seed companies own seeds. There's a whole gamut of things, and around the world, it's a big deal. You know, farmers in India have had to get out of farming because they get so in debt over their seed systems, taking on new technologies and such. So again, at its very core, if you just Google food sovereignty, there's a big food sovereignty movement in Maine in the United States, but you can learn a lot about it. And it is also something that social activists, especially Black and people of color, are also engaging in urban areas and in rural areas within their communities, is, you know, growing food for yourselves and for your community, and good food, you know.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next question from Janet. How have changes in Chatham population, climate, economy, etc., since you entered farming affected you and your farming? Would one of y'all like to respond to that? One or more of you? So we certainly see a lot of changes in all those things. The population of the county, which continues to change rapidly, and the climate. Has anybody seen any direct effects of that on your farm? Mackenzie, yes.
I think our biggest direct effect is the extreme increase in the price of land. So that's the biggest negative effect. At the same time, it gives us a greater with the increase in population and all the changes, it just gives us a greater opportunity to educate ourselves and change with the times and keep being progressive on the farm.
Awesome. Anybody else want to respond to that question?
Debbie,
Yes,
I would
Tiffany.
say I would say for me, it's actually been beneficial because with the growth that's happening in Pittsburgh specifically, I know that there's going to be tremendous amount of residential housing growth, but it also means that more businesses are popping up. And luckily, there have been a few local breweries that have opened in Pittsburgh and they want to support local farmers. So it's a win-win where I'm supplying a good that they're utilizing and it's made in Pittsburgh using Pittsburgh ingredients. So it's been a win for the partners that I have made so far in Pittsburgh that are opening up.
Okay, great. Yeah, I've always seen it that way as well. New population can definitely mean new markets. Anyone else want to respond to that question?
Yeah, this it's talking about well, Mackenzie brought it up about land, and it's becoming more of a challenge, you know, to one, just to be on the highways with equipment, and I don't know if we can do more public awareness for when you see tractors and things on the roads. But the other thing is, I think it's becoming even more important for our land conservancy groups to try to get more of our land put into conservation measures so that we can continue to keep it open and keep farming.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Things like Triangle Land Conservancy and Piedmont Land Conservancy, right? Anyone else want to respond to that one?
So I know that climate change has been something that we have definitely been thinking about and trying to adapt to. You know, when you have extreme weather, it's either feast or famine, right? We have droughts and then we have floods. We have really, really hot days, and then it's a really mild winter, and then we have a late frost well after our average frost date. And so what we try to do is, actually, it's awful, but to mediate, some of it involves using more plastic, and having tunnels, caterpillar tunnels and high tunnels and low tunnels, but also mulching, and we're trying to do no-till. And we are so thankful to Bill for having this garden built on terrace that has helped us immensely, and for having really rich, healthy soil that can keep in the moisture when we need it, and that when we don't want the moisture, it can roll down the hill. But you know, it certainly, we've been very lucky so far, but you know, hail damage is
a very real fear, threat, you know, especially when we're using plastic to protect our crops from too much rain. And then, you know, the hail can destroy the crop and all of that plastic. So just trying to stay on our toes and do what we can.
You know, I remember seeing some springs, just a major loss due to hail damage, like right as the spring crops were at their peak harvest and the farmers had already planted their summer crops as well. So it was kind of a double whammy. Okay, if no one else, I think most of y'all did respond to that, if not everybody. Let's see. Claudia asked, she works for the USDA Farm Service. What are your suggestions for outreach to new or non-traditional farming operations? Our programs, again, Farm Service Agency, used to only focus on crops such as wheat, corn, soybeans, etc. But now we have a larger variety of programs for all types of crops, and we never want to leave out farming operations who could use our programs, benefit from their programs. So she wants to know what's the best way for the Farm Service to outreach to some of these lesser known types of cropping situations. Yes, Mackenzie.
My suggestion is reaching out to current farmers in like One of Us, or getting first someone like Tucker right now is at a clinic teaching kids how to show cows, like going right to the source. Someone might be educated in it, but if they're not doing it on a day-to-day basis, they don't know what the challenges are. So the education needs to be coming from people who are in the current working conditions, good or bad.
Great. Anyone else want to add to that? Karen?
Yeah, Claudia, that's a great question. And so, I mean, I think your question is more directed at plant type stuff, but it almost seems like in the dairy industry, what we're seeing happen across the nation is you're going to milk 10,000 cows, or you're going to milk a few 100, 200, and you're going to do value added so that you bring more value to that local farm and reach out to the local community. So, you know, being married to a dairy farmer for 35 years and just watching the way our industry is changing. And I mean, I've got friends in other states that are milking 1,000 cows, and they are getting worried if they're going to be able to compete with the 10,000, the 40,000 cow herds. So how can we access funds that help us start down that venture of value added? So value added meaning we make ice cream, butter, cheese, you know, on a very local basis. Just like, for example, my milk right now goes to Winston-Salem and then it ends up in gallon jugs. But how do I do something, adding value right there on the farm? And so trying to get aid so that we can start those ventures is a big deal. And it's pretty much learning another career.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I just say something real quick. I mean, this doesn't really relate, but it kind of does. I think it's important. I think that we all saw what happened during the pandemic, like how, you know, how important small farmers became when, you know, you couldn't buy milk at the grocery store, or, you know, there was no chicken available. And, you know, I know probably Lillyden and all of the farmers saw a huge increase. So I think, you know, supporting and creating programs for these smaller farmers is super important, because of what happened and what we saw happen, and that they really stepped in and filled a huge hole when supply chains and other things went down. And I hope that, you know, there will be more programs geared towards small farmers for that reason.
Right. Thank you. All right, Tiffany, are there any hops that are native to North Carolina?
There are not. So most of the native hops originated in higher latitude areas. The southernmost latitude of a wild hop that I know of that's actually currently just growing in the wild is in New Mexico, but there are not any native hops to North Carolina.
Okay. The next question is, are there any programs or loans for someone wanting to start farming, something like small scale herbs? I get asked that question a lot. Emily?
Yeah, I would just jump in and say prior to my off-farm job for the last 4 or 5 years until early this year, I worked for Hoppy, which is a nonprofit in Pittsburgh, and they do have some loan programs for small scale farming. Right now, I think most of their programs are geared towards the Farmer of Color network that they're working with, but I think there probably going to be some expansion. So it might be worth checking with them to see if they're going to be offering any new programs this year.
Yeah, and I would say most of the grant programs available to farmers are not to start a farm. They're to solve a problem on the farm, and whether it's through a piece of equipment that someone might need, and they are offered competitively. So you have to apply, and obviously more people want them than get them. But I get asked that question all the time. People want to be money to start a farm, but that's going to be difficult to get. Now loans, yes. Let's see. We're just trying to wrap up the last couple of questions. Someone has asked what value added means. And so Emily, I'm gonna let you respond to that.
Value added is where you make products with stuff off your farm. So jams, jellies, hot sauces. I think one of the dairy farmers mentioned value add for dairy, like ice cream or yogurt or cheese. Just making any kind of products off stuff you grow off the farm.
Great. And we got one more question. And before I forget, I'm going to mention If you look back to the original announcements for this program, whether it's from the library or I did an article, we've got links to all the farms that have websites so you can learn more about them. This is a great last question to end on. Do you think your children will want to go into farming? Any thoughts about the future of farming and next generation based on the trends you're seeing? Who would like to tackle that? Karen?
Yep, sure thing. So I don't have children, but I've tried to be a good aunt and my husband a good uncle. And so our nephew and his wife are with us, and we're working towards transitioning to them. So that means a lot, you know, and trying to figure out so that they can really have a good career with this and not you don't want to see people struggle, and I think sometimes people transition farms and then the next generation is struggling also. So, we're trying to find a good way to keep this farm going.
Anyone? Thank you, Karen. That's awesome. Mackenzie, yes.
I think that I have 4 kids, and I definitely see some of them going into farming. My son, Dennett, I mean, he's going to be, maybe not take over Lillyden farm, but there is no doubt in my mind that he will do something farming. I just hope that I could teach him how progressive he needs to be, how important value-added items are, and if he stays small scale like we do, instead of like going commercially. But I have other kids who I think the second they turn 18, they're going to like run away and never look back. So, it really depends on the child and their passions. And no matter what they choose, it's all good.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Patricia, Tiffany, or
And
Emily?
really quick, it says, what is the future of our farming for the next generation? It's just so difficult. There's not a whole lot of money in farming. And I think that's the biggest challenge and what's really driving our future away, that and the fact that it's so extremely labor intensive. If we're not teaching our children to have really good work ethic and work really hard now as they're growing up, I don't think farming is going to be something children in the future are going to want to do much of. So it's a little scary, I think.
Tiffany?
So I similar to what was just said about kids, I think my kids' personalities may not take them directly into farming. I think I have kids that have a kid that has much more of an art and creative mindset that would lead her that direction. And my son, I'm not real sure. It's really hard work. And sometimes the payoff just doesn't seem to be what it could be when you could do some other things in business that get you to end results quicker. So I'm not sure that my kids will go into it. It will be interesting to see. I think that the generation of farming, I'm not sure that I don't think for American farms that it doesn't look more niche and specialty crop. I think that we'll see more movement that direction. I think there's a lot of opportunity with people having a lot more appreciation of different flavors, different foods, different specialty crops, that you could see small farms of specialty crops being grown to be grown in such a way where they can make a living off of that, rather than having to have thousands of acres to make it something that you can make a living off of. I think it may be the way it goes. I don't know though.
I know we're out of time, but just really quickly, Patricia or Emily, did y'all want to add just real quickly to that last question?
I did. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to throw in that though my kids may not be farmers, I definitely think that they have watched the business grow and they've seen kind of the background. And I think that for them, it's a really good experience to see how a small business is run. And I think their experiences are going to influence them in ways that I don't even know right now. Maybe they will end up being farmers, but I definitely think this experience is so valuable for them. And I'm really glad they had that opportunity.
Thank you. Patricia?
I don't know if my kids will want to farm, but something that I have thought about that is very important and that have tried to drill into their heads, and I hope they maintain, is that you can't eat money. So even if they don't farm, I want them to know how to grow their own food, how to access food. And I think it's extremely important for us to have a local farming system. You know, when this this country used to have, I think, 99% of the population farmed, and now it's about, what is it, 2% or 1%? It's very little, and a lot of that farming is, you know, for fuel. So I sure hope it's not the end of farming, and you know, maybe it won't look. Hopefully, it'll be all levels. You know, small, medium, large. But you know, with again what Emily said about, you know, what happened with COVID and the supply chain, and it's still happening. I think we're really realizing how valuable it is to have access to good food, clean water. If we don't have those things, it doesn't matter how much money you make.
Well, thank you. I just want to say briefly before I pass it back to Evie that I want to thank all of our panelists. I mean, I know all of y'all, but I still learn new things and really enjoyed the thought that you put into your answers. And I want to thank Rita and Evie for setting up this program. What a great idea. And I just, like I said, I'm so proud of what our farmers are doing. And I'm really glad we got to share it with y'all. And I hope the audience members enjoyed it as much as I did.
So thanks for that. And to our panelists and audience, thank you so much for joining us. Evie, do you want to close us out, please?
Just a quick comment. I want to thank Debbie and all of our panelists today because I personally learned so very much from you. Your comments, while they were directed at agriculture, they can be applied to so many aspects of life. I mean, get your education, get experience, be flexible, keep current, keep growing your skill set, stay close to your community, expect challenges, but don't get defeated by them. I think it's all relevant to every aspect of life, and I appreciate your coming in today and giving us the benefit of your experience and your knowledge. I salute you. Thank you.